phone screening, if you were here for that. And now we're moving on to the panel section, and so I will briefly introduce the panelists, and then they will go ahead and give us an introduction of who they are and who they're here representing, or their topics that they're representing. So first we have Adisha Waghmarae, if you don't mind raising your hand and being, like, waving a little bit. Adisha Waghmarae. She's the executive director for ABC Nepal, so she's flown in from Nepal to be here for a series of events this week. And so welcome, Adisha. And then we have Dr. Nayori from the Social Work Department. She is associate professor of the Social Work Department. So if you please wave, Dr. Nayori, if you'd wave. Yes. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay. And then we have Dr. Alavi, who is the assistant professor as well. And then we would go to Michael Snowden, who's the agent in charge of the Human Trafficking Unit in the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. And then we have Liz Wagner, who's the executive director for the Oklahoma Women's Coalition. Great. So we'll start with the first question as to introduction as to who they are and who they're here representing. So yes, please, if we could. Doesn't matter which order.
No, ladies first.
He's smart. He's a smart man. My name is Liz Charles now. I recently got married and I'm trying to do the awful hassle of changing my name. So I'm Liz Charles. I'm the executive director of the Oklahoma Women's Coalition. We are a statewide advocacy organization that lobbies on behalf of women's issues in Oklahoma and issues impacting women and girls. We're made up of partner organizations that are in direct service there, the boots on the ground, serving communities throughout the state, and they inform our policy and our legislation. So we translate those issues, those hurdles, those obstacles into legislation, and I'm a registered lobbyist, and during legislative session at the Oklahoma State Capitol, I'm there every single day lobbying on behalf of women in Oklahoma.
My name is Sadvi Sidalishri. I'm the director of Stopping Traffic, and first and foremost, thank you, Adisha, and all of the team to help organize this event, and to all of the students and the community that came to watch the film. It's a huge step for you to get educated about what human trafficking is and to know that it's happening here. So we'll talk more. But just to introduce myself, I am the director, I'm a monk. I'm also the spiritual director of Siddhayatan Spiritual Retreat, which is in North Texas. And so we conduct 3-day retreats teaching yoga, meditation, and helping people heal from their pain. Because always remember this, everybody has a story, everybody has pain, but everybody deserves freedom. And so my role in that is to help raise awareness and maybe teach techniques to help you shine and gain your freedom.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Oza, and I'm working as an executive director at Adisha Nepal. So it's in Nepal, and Adisha Nepal was the first organization established to fight against human trafficking in 1987. So since 1987, we have been fighting this cause. And we have different programs that we have designed. We have different supporters who have been helping us to raise awareness, raise campaigns against human trafficking. So yes, we'll be talking more, but that's for the introduction. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rexana Alavi. I'm a faculty here at OU. I teach human trafficking courses, and as some of you already know, but human trafficking wasn't really my area of research. When I started teaching human trafficking, it was really my kind of activism, if you will, community service. It was just kind of like, what can I do as my civic duty as a engaged citizen? So that's kind of how I got into the work I'm doing right now.
Hi, my name is Chloe Colbert. I'm from the School of Social Work. I'm a faculty member. Before I got into academia, I was a social worker working in Dallas. And I started human trafficking victims in Dallas. It's almost like 13 years ago. There was a huge raid, and I happened to be working in a women's shelter, taking care of those victims from East Asian countries. This is where I started to work with these issues of human trafficking. I either work on human trafficking issues or refugee issues.
Thank you. I actually realized I forgot to introduce myself. But I'm going to also let... Sorry, please, if you go ahead. Sorry. No, just go ahead.
So one of these things is not like the others. Can you tell which one? My name is Michael Snowden. In June of 2012, I was fortunate enough to be allowed to start the first and only statewide human trafficking investigative unit in the state of Oklahoma. In fact, little trivia, we were the first statewide human trafficking investigative unit in the United States. Since that time, since June of 2012, I supervise the unit of police officers, state police officers that investigate human trafficking, prosecute traffickers, act as liaison to the state legislators, and work together with the non-governmental and governmental social program service providers to aid victims throughout the state. In my spare time, I'm excited to be here. I'm a graduate student in sociology at a university which shall not be mentioned here. But we work extremely hard to bring awareness as well as enforcement to this program, and we'll talk more about that later. But we investigate the sex trafficking of adult women, the trafficking of juvenile women and boys, and two other categories which we don't talk much about: labor trafficking in Oklahoma and what we call trafficking in children, which is, in layman's terms, adoption fraud. So that's the areas we concentrate on, and thank you so much for the invitation to be among these distinguished people. Is an honor.
Thank you. So like I said, I introduced myself. It's my first time hosting a panel. If you haven't noticed, I'm like super nervous, and also it's because I can barely see over the stand because I'm super short. So that's really the main reason. So I'm Adisha Waghmarae. I'm a community educator in Traditions West. I also, for upperclassmen students, I'm also an adjunct professor in the Human Relations Department, and so in college I put this together with a team of Yana Smith, who's over there. Yana, if you'd wave. Thank you. And Emily Lee, she's somewhere, maybe she left. I think she did well. Okay, Emily Lee, thanks to her too. All right, so if we can get started in our panel. I think I will ask a question that we have prepared already, and then I will open it up to the crowd, if you're all okay with that. Does that sound good? Okay, so the first question I have for the panel is, what role do you feel society plays in the fight against human trafficking? If anyone wants to take a swing at that question, I'll start. Thanks, Raksha.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I think this was the most important question for me because coming from Nepal, a society where girls are taken as a second-class citizen, a society where women empowerment, women rights, women leadership are something you need to fight for still. So I think I took this chance to speak about the society. So yeah, indeed, society plays a very important role because a child after his birth or her birth learns everything from the society. So a society teaches a child to be a savior and also to be a trafficker. So like in context to Nepal, what I can say is like if a society can teach a person to be accepting, to be like honest, and to think that everybody is a family instead of like leaving a girl behind, I think that would really help. So like we these days are having different programs which consist of community empowerment programs where we are empowering the young girls, adolescents in the community. Because what we think is that adolescents today are mothers tomorrow. So they can help educate their child. So that is why I think like society is really important to be in order to fight human trafficking. Thank you.
I'll add to that. And this is probably going to have a lot of crossover with, the role of government, the role of legislature. From my perspective, I wholly agree with the fact that society shapes our belief systems, our mindsets, our biases, our values. But there's a touch point that happens before we are, so inundated by our culture, and, in whatever form that comes in, whether that be the media or otherwise. And that's at the family, that's at the home level. And so we have deeply ingrained biases, racism, discrimination, disenfranchisement, practices and belief systems in our institutions, but those start somewhere, right? That white man in power who is, supporting discriminatory policies or programs was taught that. That was instilled in him somewhere, and it was most likely instilled in him in his home or those that he spent a lot of time with as a child. So I think our main goal as advocates, and whatever your sphere of influence is, whatever your passion is, whatever that thing is that says this is a thing I care about and I want to be known for engaging in, we have an obligation to educate parents, to educate our society on the importance of training our own families, our own kids. I have 2 little boys, and if they're wrestling with each other and one of them says, "No, stop, don't touch me anymore," and it's easy to just kind of have these subconscious, entitlements ingrained in us at such a young age, because they're just wrestling, right? It's no big deal. They're just roughhousing. They're just having fun. Boys will be boys. That's just what they do. Unfortunately, if we don't intersect, and if I don't stand up and say, hey, when someone says no, that is enough, and you don't get to make them feel guilty, you don't get to pout, you don't get what you want is not more important than their ability, their autonomy, and their ability to speak for themselves. So I think those seem like no big deal sorts of things because, kids are kids. But it's intersecting in any way you can with the people that you have any sort of influence over or those that you have responsibility for. Additionally, I think starting to have a very engaged and informed conversation around trauma and around the impact of trauma and ACEs. If you hear anything about adverse childhood experiences and their impact on our physical, mental, and emotional health and kind of how they shape our worldview, we are criminalizing victims. And I'm sure we're going to get into that a whole lot more today. But we're criminalizing poor people. We're criminalizing people of color. We are criminalizing and punishing people in Oklahoma and across our country for being victims of abuse, for being victims of trauma. And so until we start to really have those difficult conversations of talking about bias, talking about prejudice, talking about racism in circles of where there is power and where there's an ability to influence, and we are keeping those individuals accountable and asking those ourselves and others those difficult questions, we're going to continue to just do this, just accept it or decline even worse.
Anybody? Let me add one last thing in how that bias and prejudice and racism affects us on the local level. I've been very, very fortunate. I teach not only all over the state of Oklahoma, but I teach at all the police academies in Kansas and Arkansas, and now Colorado soon. My point is, Oklahomans are notorious for looking for the boogeyman, the bad guy, to be from somewhere else. And while we're busy focusing on those others who are coming here to victimize us, we're ignoring the fact that we're victimizing ourselves. Yeah. The vast majority of traffickers in Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, I can tell you for certain, are locals, born and raised. They're victimizing each other. So while we are waiting with bated breath to see this other, this evil from somewhere else, it's happening right in front of us from local citizens. whether that's the businessman who is recruiting Filipino national citizens to come work for him for free, or that's the sex trafficker in Oklahoma City, Tulsa, McAllister, Lawton, or Stillwater. Guys, it's us, victimizing us. I just wanted to add that as we were talking about bias and prejudice.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
Remember when I worked for the human trafficking victims in Dallas, like 13 years ago? Those are the ladies trafficked from Eastern Asian countries. And actually, after served for these victims, I learned that where they were trafficked, they're forced to work was exactly, that was a massage parlor right next to where I was shopping, grocery shopping. And that happened to be in the Asian area, which I used to go. And I remember seeing some letters saying massage. I never ever, because this was before really I learned about human trafficking, so I never ever thought what was going on there was that horrible thing was going on. So I think any ordinary people in our society can play a huge role to just look for it. If you feel like there's something wrong going on, you can just report to police, or you can talk about this with your friends. That could be the one tiny little action might actually help some victims. Where you never thought those things are going on in your town, but it's going on everywhere. So that could be something we all can do.
One of the main goals of the film was to educate college students, because you have such an important role in changing our society. And I remember having this thought that if maybe one girl, one guy was thinking about going overseas and buying a child for sex, it would be prevented because of this film. So change starts with you. We think about changing society, we think about changing government, we think about changing other people, but it really comes down to us. What are our desires? Do we keep ourselves in check? Do we judge other people, or do we judge ourselves? Do we hate other people? Do we hate ourselves? So if we want to change society, change yourself. And it's a hard question to ask, because you have to be honest with yourself. And so, of course, ultimately, we all want to have a better society. We want all children free, men, women, boys, girls, because that's what they deserve. But are you free? And so when we start approaching changing society and these things, just always keep in mind, what can I do to change myself? Because that's how you inspire other people. Right? You can't wish for a peaceful world if peace is not in your heart. And so that's when we come together in that kind of way, and everybody is true to themselves, believes in themselves, is fully confident in themselves, that's how we get to make a difference. And for the film, that's what I was trying to show, that the movement starts with us. It starts with you guys. And so by being here, pay attention to what the experts here on the panel have to say. When I started the film, I didn't know much, and in some ways I feel like I don't know much. I was telling like shit, because there's so many dimensions to human trafficking. But as long as you're committed to a cause and making some change, you will. So you can change society, so just close your eyes and figure out who that is.
Paul Taylor, he's a philosopher of race, and he talks about the way we learn about racism is the same way we learn about language. So you can substitute racism for all of the other stuff that other panelists have talked about, and think about how we learn about all the other things that we learn about that just put together kind of create a society that would create a bunch of vulnerable people that it can be taken advantage of. Because so long as they're vulnerable people, they're going to be able to take advantage of them. And so long as there's demand, and I think your movie talks about that, so far as there's demand, there's going to be somebody who's willing to supply that demand. So I think when you would think about what you can do and how society can change, because we get this impression that this is how our society is, but if you think about how things have changed in the last 50 or 100 years, you'll know you can change this. It might be slow, but slow change is better than no change whatsoever. So it's the idea of like thinking, what is it you can do? One of the simplest things that that you can think about is don't laugh at funny jokes about sex workers. I mean, because we do live in this world of like good girl, bad girl, good people, bad people. So they have this dichotomy. So we just like, whatever we say about these people who are like the bad people, we can just say them. And it's okay, because we've objectified them and dehumanized them. So I think that's what actually another philosopher calls it civilized oppression, which is how we perpetuate social stereotypes and social oppression of different marginalized populations through humor. So what we have, what we can do as a society and how society can affect it, think about just your everyday. Think about how you learn language and think about how you learn about all the other beliefs that we have.
Thank you. Do we have any? Do we have any questions from the audience before? Yeah. Oh, yes.
The areas that are being trafficked the most, do those impact areas that are more in poverty, or is it equally impacted across like different communities? And if so, does it take an impact on a higher class like community to have more of an impact on socialized areas of trafficking?
What was the last part of your question?
Like if communities like here in Norman work, I think about like human traffickers, they probably are, but they would more often, you know, the suburbs of communities that higher class communities, would that attract more attention towards, you know, like reporting or like sex trafficking and stuff like that?
Okay. So the question is poverty the reason for human trafficking? Human trafficking happens in impoverished areas, or does it happen in the more affluent areas? And if human trafficking affected the more affluent areas, we would pay more attention.
So, to your question, yes, it does affect, poverty is definitely one of the causes behind human trafficking. But having said that, looking at the incidents that we have, we receive the cases of, we can say that it not only is affected by poverty, because majority of the girls who we receive belong to a middle class family. A family who can afford enough for the education, for the livelihood. So with that, what I can say is like trafficking happens anywhere, everywhere. So it does not look people with like property or education. But what I can say is like not property, but yes, education indeed plays a major role. Because if you are educated and if you are poor, you can be saved. But if you are rich and if you are ignorant, then you are trafficked. So that is what I have to say for that.
And just to share one story, I was speaking with a Texas oil executive, and because when I was filming and interviewing all these people, it was mostly those that were in vulnerable positions and coming from poor countries and these things. And so when I spoke with this executive, his own daughter was trafficked. And this is money, right? And so he went to the police, he went to the sheriff's department. I was just telling Raksha this story. He was doing everything he can, and he thought, well, I have a bunch of money, I'm gonna, get some help. And they couldn't find her. So he eventually had to put in his own money, hire a private investigator, and fortunately, they found her. And so she was being groomed in Christian summer camp. So this is considered a safe place, right? So, so just to share a story that those who are wealthy, even their kids are not exempt from being trafficked. Just like Rakshia said, whoever is vulnerable, it's a possibility that they can get trafficked.